The young and the restless spoilers. When Mitch arrived in Los Angeles, the city's fragile calm shattered like glass. His presence wasn't announced or expected, it was felt, a disturbance that rippled quietly through the ranks of those who thought they understood how the world worked. No one really knew who Mitch was, but everyone could feel that something about him was dangerous. The way he spoke, the stillness behind his eyes, the subtle arrogance that followed every word, it all hinted at someone who wasn't just visiting. Mitch had come for a reason, and whatever it wasn't peace. Los Angeles, with all its glitz and control, was about to learn that there are secrets too dark to stay buried, and Mitch carried them like weapons. Nick Newman felt it before he understood it. The unease that settled into him wasn't about jealousy or business or even fear, it was instinct. Something in Mitch's sudden appearance didn't add up, and every conversation since then seemed to twist in circles. Nick had spent years dealing with people like Victor, Adam, and countless others who thrived on deception, but Mitch was different. He didn't play games. He created them. Every attempt Nick made to understand him only pushed him further into confusion. The man didn't just have secrets, he was one. And while Nick prided himself on his instincts, this time they weren't enough. He needed someone who could see past the layers, someone ruthless, cunning, and utterly fearless when it came to confrontation. That someone was Phyllis Summers. Phyllis's arrival in Los Angeles was like oxygen feeding a dormant flame. She didn't come for drama, she was the drama, and wherever she went, truth eventually followed, whether people wanted it or not. She had heard whispers about Mitch, about a man tied to hidden agendas and unspoken alliances, and it intrigued her. The fact that Nick was already caught in the middle only sharpened her resolve. She knew Nick too well. His heart was always in the right place, but his head often wasn't. He wanted to believe people, even when he shouldn't. He wanted to fix problems that couldn't be fixed. And this time, that naive trust could destroy him. So, she packed her sharp wit, her instinct for danger, and her relentless curiosity, and she came to help him the only way she knew how, by tearing the truth out of anyone standing in her way. It didn't take long for Phyllis to notice what others had missed. Sienna. On the surface, she was all charm and composure, intelligent, poised, and seemingly harmless. But Phyllis had built her life on reading people, on sensing the cracks beneath the polish. She had seen that same kind of calculated grace before, in women who used vulnerability as a shield and seduction as a strategy. Sienna's eyes betrayed her long before her words did. They were too cautious, too rehearsed. Phyllis knew instantly that she was hiding something. So, she did what Phyllis always did best, she started watching. Quietly at first, appearing to play along with the pleasant conversations, the shared meals, the casual laughter. But beneath that surface, she was taking mental notes, tracking patterns, connections, inconsistencies. She followed Sienna's movements, her calls, the people she met. Within days, Phyllis had pieced together a web of information that even Nick wouldn't have believed existed. Mitch wasn't just a mystery man passing through Los Angeles. He was connected to Sienna. And Sienna, in turn, was hiding something explosive, something that tied back not only to Mitch but possibly to Victor and the entire Newman family's fragile empire. Phyllis didn't waste time confronting Sienna directly. She wanted Nick there, partly for backup and partly because she wanted him to see. He needed to understand that sometimes the people who smiled the most were the ones twisting the knife. When she called him, her voice carried that familiar mix of urgency and confidence. Nick didn't question her. He knew that when Phyllis sounded like that, it meant the ground was about to move. When they finally cornered Sienna, it wasn't dramatic at first. Phyllis was almost calm, the kind of calm that comes before a storm. She walked around the woman slowly, speaking in that deliberate tone that made her both mesmerizing and terrifying. She told Sienna she knew about the lies, the phone calls, the meetings with Mitch. She mentioned dates, places, names, things that no one else should have known. Each word stripped away another layer of Sienna's composure until the mask finally began to crack. Sienna tried to play innocent at first. She said Mitch was just an acquaintance, that she had met him by coincidence, that whatever rumors were spreading were the result of misunderstandings. But Phyllis's expression didn't change. Her eyes, sharp and cold, told Sienna that she wasn't dealing with a fool. Nick watched the exchange with growing unease, torn between disbelief and admiration. He had seen Phyllis in battle before, but this was different. She wasn't just angry, she was surgical. When Phyllis pressed harder, the truth began to slip. Sienna's carefully rehearsed narrative started to crumble under pressure. She stumbled over her explanations, contradicted herself, and finally stopped trying to pretend. Her silence spoke louder than her excuses. And that was when Phyllis went in for the kill, not with cruelty, but with precision. She asked the question that shattered the last of Sienna's defenses: why? Why all the deception, why the manipulation, why the need to infiltrate lives that didn't belong to her? The moment stretched into quiet tension. Sienna's face changed, her confidence replaced by something darker: guilt, fear, maybe even regret. She whispered that she had no choice, that she had been promised something, that Mitch had given her reasons she couldn't refuse. She spoke about protection, about debts, about threats that had followed her for years. And though she didn't reveal everything, it was enough for Phyllis to see the pattern. Mitch wasn't just another con man. He was orchestrating something much larger, using people like Sienna as pawns in a game none of them fully understood. When Sienna finally broke down, admitting pieces of the truth, Nick looked stunned. He had wanted to believe that she was misunderstood, maybe even innocent. But now, the picture was too clear to deny. Phyllis had peeled away every illusion, exposing the chaos beneath. She turned to Nick with that knowing look, the one that said, "You should have listened sooner." But there was no gloating in her eyes, only exhaustion. Because even victory in Genoa City, or Los Angeles, always came at a cost. The confrontation ended not with shouting but with silence. Sienna sat motionless, her face pale and tear-streaked, while Nick struggled to process what he had learned. Phyllis, ever the strategist, was already thinking ahead. She knew Mitch wouldn't stop here. This was just the beginning. He had planted too many seeds, manipulated too many people. His web stretched farther than anyone realized, and if they didn't act fast, the damage could spread beyond control. Later, as Phyllis and Nick left the apartment, the night air felt heavier than before. Nick thanked her quietly, his pride subdued by the reality of what they had uncovered. Phyllis didn't respond right away. Her eyes lingered on the skyline, glittering with artificial light, and for a moment she almost smiled. She wasn't satisfied, not yet, but she had seen this pattern before. Every time someone new came to town claiming to know the truth, it ended in the same way: secrets, destruction, and the reminder that no one in their world was ever truly innocent. Mitch, wherever he was, would soon learn that bringing chaos to Los Angeles meant drawing fire from Genoa City's most dangerous woman. And Phyllis Summers never lost twice. Sienna's composure shattered like glass beneath the pressure of Phyllis's relentless questioning. The woman who had hidden behind calm smiles and careful deflection now trembled openly, tears tracing down her cheeks as if years of secrets were finally collapsing under their own weight. Her voice, once steady and manipulative, broke into fragmented whispers that carried both fear and exhaustion. She admitted that she couldn't keep lying anymore, that Mitch wasn't just some shadowy acquaintance or passing threat. He was someone she had once trusted, someone who had promised her safety in exchange for silence. But that promise had curdled into control, and control into terror. The longer she spoke, the clearer it became that Sienna wasn't just part of Mitch's plan, she was one of his victims. He had manipulated her with the same precision he used on everyone else, twisting her fears into loyalty until she couldn't tell the difference between obedience and survival. Phyllis stood over her, every line of her face carved with suspicion and hard-earned empathy. She didn't gloat, she didn't need to. She knew this moment wasn't about victory, it was about truth. And truth in Genoa City's extended universe was never clean, it was jagged, bloody, and layered with betrayal. As Sienna sobbed, Phyllis crouched beside her, lowering her voice to a dangerous calm. She demanded one thing, Mitch's location. It was the piece of information she had been chasing since the moment she stepped foot in Los Angeles, the one thread that could finally unravel everything he had built. For a long moment, Sienna hesitated, torn between fear of Mitch's retribution and desperation to finally be free of him. Her hands shook as she pressed them against her face, the silence thick enough to suffocate. And then, with a trembling breath, she said it, the address, the place where Mitch was hiding. A small, private property tucked away in the Hollywood Hills, disguised as a real estate investment but operating more like a fortress. The name of the street hit Nick like a jolt. He recognized it. It was the same area where one of Victor's former business partners had quietly vanished years ago, a location whispered about but never confirmed. That alone told him how deep this went. Mitch hadn't just chosen a random place to hide, he had chosen somewhere soaked in Newman history, somewhere symbolic. Nick felt a chill crawl up his spine as he exchanged a glance with Phyllis. This wasn't coincidence. It was design. Phyllis, however, didn't let excitement show. She knew better than to celebrate too soon. Her instincts screamed that the moment something seemed easy, it was already a trap. She pressed Sienna for more details, who else knew, what kind of security he had, whether anyone else had been there. But Sienna was slipping into panic, her words tumbling over each other as if speaking them aloud would somehow make her complicit. She insisted that Mitch didn't operate alone, that there were people who owed him favors, people scattered between Genoa City and Los Angeles who protected him without even knowing it. He's everywhere, she whispered, her eyes wide and unfocused. He doesn't just hide. He watches. Phyllis straightened, her expression unreadable. Nick could tell she was already assembling a plan in her head, one that involved precision and risk in equal measure. She told him quietly that they were going after Mitch, that if this was their only lead, they couldn't afford to lose it. Nick hesitated, he knew how dangerous Mitch could be, how smart. But there was something unspoken between him and Phyllis, a shared understanding that neither of them could walk away now. Too much had been revealed. Too many lives were already tangled in this web. As they prepared to leave, Sienna's emotions shifted from fear to fury. Her tears dried into anger, and she turned on Phyllis with a venomous glare. She accused her of ruining everything, of forcing her hand, of exposing her to a man who would never forgive betrayal. Her voice rose until it cracked, echoing through the apartment like a warning. "You don't understand what he's capable of," she shouted. "You think you've won, but you've just made yourself the next target." The threat hung in the air long after she fell silent. Phyllis didn't flinch. She simply turned, looked back at Sienna with the calm of someone who had faced worse and survived, and told her to stay put. "You'll be safe once we find him," she said, though even she didn't sound convinced. Outside, the Los Angeles night was sharp and tense, the kind of darkness that hummed with electricity. Nick followed Phyllis to the car, his mind racing. Every instinct told him this was spiraling out of control, that Mitch had predicted their every move. But Phyllis's focus was unshakable. She had seen too many men like Mitch, powerful, manipulative, hiding behind charm and mystery. And she knew one thing, when people like that believed they were untouchable, that was the moment they slipped. She was going to make sure Mitch slipped hard. Meanwhile, miles away, Mitch was already aware. He sat in a dimly lit room, surrounded by monitors and files that mapped every corner of his growing operation. His face remained calm as he watched a live feed from a hidden camera planted in Sienna's apartment. He had heard everything, every word, every confession. The faintest smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth as he reached for his glass of whiskey. He murmured something under his breath, a whisper of satisfaction laced with contempt. "She broke," he said to no one in particular. "Just as I knew she would." But even as he celebrated, a flicker of irritation passed through his eyes. Phyllis Summers. He had underestimated her once, assuming she was just another schemer driven by vanity and pride. But she was different. She was dangerous because she was patient. He knew her reputation, how she could dismantle empires with nothing more than persistence and intuition. Mitch respected that kind of intelligence, even as he planned how to destroy it. Back at the hotel, Nick was pacing, restless. He couldn't shake the unease that came with hunting someone like Mitch. Every instinct told him they were walking straight into a trap, but he also knew that Phyllis wouldn't back down. He watched her as she prepared, her mind already 10 steps ahead. He admired her fearlessness but also feared what it might cost. For all her brilliance, Phyllis had a habit of pushing too far, of crossing lines and daring others to stop her. This time, he wasn't sure anyone could. By morning, the plan was set. They would go to the address Sienna had given them, approach carefully, and see what they could uncover. Phyllis had arranged backup, quiet, unofficial contacts who owed her favors. Nick hated the idea of putting her in danger, but Phyllis reminded him that danger was the only language people like Mitch understood. Sienna, left alone, was unraveling. Her fear had metastasized into panic, and she began making calls, frantic, desperate attempts to warn Mitch or at least to save herself. But it was too late. Her betrayal had already been noted, and Mitch didn't forgive betrayal. The irony was cruel. In revealing his location, she had sealed her own fate. As Phyllis and Nick drove toward the Hollywood Hills, the city seemed unnaturally quiet, the morning sun too bright for what awaited them. Phyllis gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind replaying every detail, every clue Sienna had given. She could almost feel Mitch's presence ahead, not just as an enemy, but as a shadow she was meant to expose. For once, Nick said nothing. There was nothing left to say. What they didn't know. What they couldn't know, was that Mitch was already waiting. He had planned for this moment, orchestrated every step. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and as Phyllis and Nick drew closer, the line between truth and danger blurred beyond recognition. Because in Los Angeles, nothing ever stays hidden for long. And when secrets finally rise to the surface, they don't just reveal, they destroy.